Anthony, Megan, all yours. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Chip, and hi, everyone. And I'll take a moment to introduce myself, and I'll let Megan then do her. I'm Anthony Fernandez, and I teach at Merrimack College, which is just about 20 miles north of Boston.
I'm Meghan Porter. I teach at Indiana University, so about an hour south of Indy, but the Bloomington campus, so the flagship campus.
And so I'm happy to see all of you here today. I know many of you, but the idea for this discussion actually came out of a thread on the Discord. And so if all of you are on Discord, that's great. If there are some of you who haven't joined the server, I would suggest that you do that. There's tons of information that gets zoomed back and forth on that platform, and we'd love to have you there. It's a great way for us to connect sort of online but asynchronously, and I highly recommend it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, and I have some slides, and hopefully all of you saw the link that I put up, and hopefully everyone can see my presentation. Yes. Thanks, Amanda. Okay. And so what I would like to start by doing is we want to talk a little bit about how Meghan and I have flipped our classes. And so in the first few slides, I have some resources, some definitions, and links. I'm not going to go through everything on my slides because I just want to get to the discussion part where we can talk together about what goes and terrifies us about all of this. So flipped learning has been around for quite a while, and there's a lot of competing ways that people try to define flipped learning. The Flipped Learning Network actually a few years ago decided that it needed to have one good definition, and this is straight from their website. And so really, when we talk about flipped learning, it's moving the stuff that we often do in lecture outside of lecture and turn our class meeting times into spaces where we can engage our students actively with the material. And when you think about flipped learning, there are people who think that it's sort of you're either flipped or you're not. And that's really sort of not the case. And okay, except I can't advance my slides, everyone. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Everything freaked out on me there. So I have a whole bunch of articles and things that you can link to, so you can feel free to go take a look at any of those. The one that I find the most useful is the first article by MK Siri. That has a lot of information about how the flipped classroom has been applied to chemistry, and he's looked through other studies, and so he's done an analysis of things published. So that's a really good place to start, I think. And so when we talk about flipping, really, I like to think of it as it being on a spectrum, whereas at one end you have a pure lecture, and at the other end you have 100% flipped class, where there's in essence zero of the instructor giving any type of lecture. And while those are the two extremes, most people who I know who've done this sort of live somewhere in the middle between the end of those two extremes. And as you move from left to right, through the natural way that you do this, you increase the level of active learning by your students. And so the phrases that you'll often hear is in lecture, you're the sage on the stage, where the instructor imparts all of the information. And in a flipped classroom, it's called the guide on the side, where the instructor sort of helps students sort of move through the material, but does not primarily impart information in the face-to-face setting. And in the link down the bottom, that's sort of, one way to think about how you can go and classify how your class is set up. And so I want to talk a little bit about some stuff that I've done in my general chemistry course. I'm using this because I just revised everything for the spring, but this is roughly the way that I run all of my classes, including my inorganic and my advanced classes. So, in my Gen Chem 2 class, this is the 4th course of our intro sequence. It's at the end of our 1-to-1 sequence, and we just haven't changed the name yet because we don't know what the heck to call it. So we're still calling it General Chemistry 2. And just to give you an idea, the technology that we use in here, we use Chem 101 is both a classroom response system and our online homework. And at Merrimack, all of our students have iPads and Apple Pencils. So that's a great thing that our students have that we really love. This course has been delivered using both Blackboard and Google Classroom. I like Google Classroom a bit better, but you can do it using whatever LMS you have. And so I like to say that I use what's called a hybrid model, because for a number of years I did sort of a pure flipped classroom where I would have students prep for class by reading, by watching videos, and by doing some interactives pre-class. Then when they got into class, I would have group work planned for the whole session. I had a number of students who struggled in that, so I've sort of pulled back just a little bit, and I'll explain to you how I incorporate short lectures into my classes as I go through. So again, I just want to show you my grading scheme just to show that the pre-class assignments that I have my students do in the in-class work, they're worth about 10% of the overall course grade. So because I wanted to give my students a chance to complete these very low stakes assignments that are graded for effort and not accuracy. So as long as they get prepared, then I give them full credit. I do also give them a chance to drop a few of these because, you know, students are going to get sick or something. So I have it set that students can drop up to 3 in any given term. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Everything went haywire here. I'm going to try this once more. Sorry, everyone. No, sorry. Okay. Can you see this again? Sorry, just everything went black on my end. Is that back up? Okay, thank you. Sorry. And so the way that I set up a week in my class is shown by this document that I give out each week. So for a set of 3 class meetings, I give them a list of the sections that will be covered. I give a list of the things that they should know how to do when they come to class. And I found that this is actually incredibly important, because when you flip a class, one of the really important things is to have students have a clear expectation as to what they should bring in, because I find that there are a number of students who have struggled when they're given the freedom to prepare on their own, that they don't know what they need to bring to class, and it makes them very nervous. Then also what I do is I ask for feedback before class. So you'll see in my next section, I have feedback, and I set that up with a Google form where I ask them a few questions, which I will show you on the next slide. I try to figure out what students are confused by in their preparation. Then I list any assignments that they have. On this particular week, I had a FET interactive that I used as a preparation, and there was a series of guiding questions that they have to answer. And then I also have a short paragraph about what will be covered in the lab sections, because I try in this class to take lab data and we move it from lab into lecture. So we'll often use the time somewhat fluidly. I just want to talk for a moment about the videos that I use. In a perfect world, what studies have shown is that students love to have instructors make their own videos because they like hearing their instructors' voices. In reality, it is a huge time sink, and it is really the limiting factor in creating a flipped classroom. There is some really good content out there. On now YouTube, I have some links. Khan Academy has some. I'll often use the videos that come with my textbook, and I will link them straight into my LMS. If you are going to make your own, there are some tools that you can use. On your iPad, you can screen record, and I have a set of instructions there. You can use an app like Explain Everything to make what I call the Khan Academy style video, where your face is not in it, but you just see the screen. You can also use screen capture programs. I know many people use Camtasia. That's a great program. It's hefty, so is the price. The Snagit is the younger sibling of Camtasia. It does a lot of great stuff. It allows you to screen capture. It doesn't have all the tools to edit your videos afterwards. So if you just want to do a quick screen capture, Snagit works great. If you have a Mac, you can use your QuickTime player. Or if you have Zoom, you can use that to go record your screen as well. I also use a lot of interactives, like those from FET, because I like students to get a visual image of what we're going to talk about. But when you use those, again, you have to have a very specific purpose. You have to have a set of guiding questions or instructions. You know, please do this and then answer this question now based upon what you observe. I've tried in the past to give students a bit more free reign over how they use the interactives, and I find that the less specificity I give in my instructions, the less they take away from it. So you really have to give them good instructions. Sorry, I can't. Oh, sorry, Megan. I went too far. So there's always discussion as to how do you make sure your students are prepared, and how do you ensure that they've read? So I've done this in a couple of different ways. I often will go set up assignments in my online homework system that are based on the videos. If not, if you want to use something that is self-contained within the within the video itself, you can use something like Edpuzzle, which is free. You can upload your video, and you set some waypoints, and it stops, and the students have to answer a question. There are many campuses who have access to a tool called Panopto, and that gives you the same capabilities as well as a place to host your videos. And then there's also been some discussion about Pear Deck, which you put straight in your slides, and as the presentation goes through, it stops and you can embed questions. One slight drawback to Pear Deck is the really cool ways of inputting, like drawing, aren't available in the free version, so you have to get the pro version, which is about $150 per year. The way that I often make sure my students are prepped is I'll put a series of questions in Google Forms before I come into class. So I like that sort of go watch the videos and then do something based upon those videos. And these are due before they come to class. And the way that I have it set up is I tell my students, if you turn it in, I give you full credit. If you don't turn it in by class, you get a 0. End of story. And they can't make up those points. They can drop a few at the end, but I try to make sure that they go and they get it in pre-class. And then here's the really simple survey that I use to check in at the beginning. I just asked them 2 questions. Do you feel prepared? Yes or no? And then what's one topic or concept that you really want me to go over? I implemented these about 4 semesters ago, and it totally changed my students' perception of having them read and prepare ahead of time, because they felt that I was taking their feedback and then I would adjust then what I would do in class, because in class, then what I do is I take the results of those survey, of that survey, and then I plan sort of a 15 to 20-minute lecture that is based upon what they tell me is the thing that confuses them the most. Often it's 1 concept, it's 2 sometimes, but I try to limit my sort of speaking at them to about 20 to 25 minutes for any class, which would be, my normal class is 1 hour and 15 minutes long. So I try to do it no more than 1/3 of the class. Then outside of that, I have students work in groups when they're face-to-face, or when we're remote, I have them in Zoom breakout rooms, and I have them work together. One thing that I've learned over the time that I've been doing this is it's important to have a deliverable for this section. Often I'll use something in my classroom response system which isn't traceable back to the group, but I find that if I give a group an assignment, the group has to hand it in, and then I call on them afterwards. That makes them feel much more accountable, and it also makes them much more involved in the process. I find if I don't do that, they sort of go and do other things. And as I said, I give problems in class either through my online homework system or something, or I've been doing more recently is I just ship out a PDF file that they can annotate on their iPad with their Apple Pencil, and then they send that back into me. So when I get to the point where I can call up an assignment and say, okay, can this group go and talk me through that assignment? And if you don't have a student that has an iPad and an Apple Pencil, I used to have students just go and write on a sheet of paper, and then they would take a photo and then go and send that back into me. And that works as well. It's a little bit slower, but it works just fine. So that's roughly the way that I set up all of my classes in sort of an almost fully flipped format. I would say I'm sort of about 60% towards fully flipped, maybe 65. And the other piece that I want to give you is not every topic works well in a flipped setting. I've taught general chemistry 2 for 20 years. And the one topic I find that does not work really well is chemical kinetics. I have tried this flipped and it is an utter disaster. Okay, so I will often choose maybe one or two topics that, while I incorporate lots of active group learning, I don't necessarily have them watch as many videos beforehand. So that's the one last thing that I'll say. Okay, and now that's a nice segue into Meghan, which hopefully her slide will come up in just a second. Maybe, maybe not.
Yay.
Okay, hold on. Here we go, man. Okay, there you go, Meghan.
Okay, so some logistics about my course. It's an upper level inorganic, but we also do a 1-2-1. So it comes after Gen Chem 1, Orgo 1 and 2, and Organic Lab. We don't have a textbook or an online homework system, so I'm kind of on my own for that. It's 160 students, although starting this fall, it's going up to 200. Yay. It's mostly juniors and seniors, and about 70% non-chemistry majors. So it's a lot of, so all chemistry majors would take it, but then it's a lot of biology, psychology, any pre-health, pre-med, anything like that. So majority of the semester, this is why we had Anthony go first. I teach a lot like that. I don't do a fully flipped. So what I'm going to focus on are the 3 topics, and it's about 5 weeks of our 16-week semester that I do completely flip the classroom. So I do it for MO theory, crystal and ligand field theory, and organometallics. So before I started flipping those sections, I noticed my students would just, especially with MO, because it's so pattern based, they would watch one of us do it and be like, oh yeah, that's fine. I'm good. I don't need to practice it. And they wouldn't start practicing it till we were almost done with it. And then inevitably figure out it's not actually all that easy. And already they were a week behind and we had moved on to something else. So, and I'm very honest about my students, or to my students, that I tell them, essentially, I'm going to make them know the first day that it's not as easy as they think it is, and let them practice it. So that's why I started flipping those particular pieces. And then if you want to switch the slide, letting Anthony control all the slides.
I'm trying, but it's
fine.
It's slow. It's coming.
So I can just start telling you about it. So the day 1, or slide earlier. Yep.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go. So I spend a lot of time on day 1 explaining what flipping is and why I think it will benefit them. And this was something, when I started, I was very much, I'm going to use day 1 for content. And then I felt like I was fighting them the rest of the semester, trying to prove that this was worth their while. And so I actually show them that little chart with the highlighting is, I can't remember if that's from Forbes. That's one of the sources I use it from, but it's the top 10 things that employers look for. Since majority of my students aren't going on to grad school, let alone in chemistry, I want to show them that it's not chemistry specific, even though we're going to learn chemistry. And so I like to point out that technical skills is actually really low on that list, but things like teamwork, communication skills, and problem solving are always near the top. And especially, at least with my students, and because they're juniors and seniors, and not to super stereotype, but they are pre-meds. And so the idea of working with someone and not having full control of their own work really scares them. So I like to point that out. And then I also use previous student feedback. So that's one that I just pick out. I give a survey at the end of the semester where students pointed out that if they sit next to people they knew, they would be less likely to actually talk about the questions. Because I do assign seats in my class, and amazingly enough, I've done it 3 semesters now, and I have not gotten any pushback from students. So I'm pretty psyched about that. When I'm not remote, I change groups 3 times during the semester. I will scale back on that because they're going to be remote this fall, so I want them more time to get to know each other. I used to use CapMe, but now it's not free anymore, so I do it myself. There's an example of one of our lecture halls where you can see I've spaced out the groups, and I literally just assign their seats using an Excel file. So far that's worked out pretty well. If you want to go to the next one.
It's thinking, Meghan.
That's fine. I can just start with it. My basic flip structure. So this is the fully flipped. Before class, students watch assigned lectures. They don't have a textbook, so they are lectures by me, and Anthony's right, that took forever. So when people talk about the length of the videos, ideally being 7 to 10 minutes, if you were to look at mine, some of mine are longer, and they're getting redone about every 2 years. So right now I just give students a warning and tell them to pause in the middle. And I'll show you, I'm gonna log into my LMS afterwards and show you what those videos look like. They include embedded quiz questions. You could easily do them as a quiz afterward or anything like that, but I'll show you what it looks like to embed. And how you use those is up to you. I have some friends who give full credit for correct answer, half credit for incorrect, but they tried it, and then 0 for nothing. Mine are just based on effort. I personally disable the seeking forward on videos so they can't just skip to the question. They could still play it and walk away, but they technically can't just skip forward to it. During class, each group is given 2 copies. So if you notice the slide before, the way it's set up, because I have a traditional lecture hall, I have 2 and then 2. So their group is actually between 2 rows so they can turn around and talk instead of 4 people in a line. So I give each group, the front 2 people get their own copy and the back 2 people get their own copy. I learned that if I gave every student their own, then they just worked on their own and didn't actually talk to anyone. So this forces them to talk. Before they're allowed to ask questions from the teaching team, they have to turn around and talk to the other 2 people behind them. So we really do encourage the group. But at the end of the activity, everyone does walk away with their own copy, whether I post it on the LMS or give it to them. So that way nobody feels like they got cheated. I bring the students together periodically to check in. I don't have I'm really jealous that you have so much technology. My students don't. I have an iPad, and so I'll have students answer using the iPad. I also have a response system that I'll show you on the next slide. And then because of having such a huge class, my teaching team is myself and 1 graduate TA. And then I use as many undergrad TAs as I can get for this. For our department, they are unpaid and they can only get credit for being a UTA once, which was scary to me because I teach a later class in the sequence. So most of them have already done it. I have still never had an issue because at a school that's so big like IU, this is a great way for them to actually get to know an instructor for rec letters. So even though they're not actually getting anything out of it for being a UTA for me, it still works out and they still volunteer. And then I assign UTAs. Normally I can work out, I have about a 1 UTA for every 5 groups. And so I assign them to the same section that entire semester so they get to know those students and the students feel comfortable. And then the grad TA and I kind of float around. And then after class, before the next class period, I just do it on my LMS, but they answer as a group 1 takeaway. So what they thought the key point was, and then 1 thing that they're still really confused about. And I usually do a short 3 to 4 minute video that I post for them on that kind of whatever their most confusing topics were. And then the videos, I do a couple different ones since I do make them myself. The ones I'm going to show you on the LMS, I actually made using a faculty media production space. We are wicked spoiled at IU. We have a production space that they will edit them professionally for us. So I use that only for the fully flipped. The other ones, I don't have me in it. But those I'm actually in, and I will admit, me showing them to you will be the first time I've looked at them. I don't like seeing myself on camera. I also use, we use Kaltura with our LMS, which is Canvas. So that will just be like my screen or me through a webcam if I want. And then I use Doceri on an iPad. You can use it on a Surface Pro as well. It's like half free. Doceri as a program is free, but it just gives you kind of a white screen. You can make videos, you can edit them, that type of thing. If you want to be able to annotate your PowerPoints, which is what you're seeing on that trans effects slide, that's a PowerPoint I would put up and just write on it during class. That requires coupling to the Doceri desktop software, which is not free, but it's a one-time $30, so it's not a huge hit to do it. And I actually use that also when I do talk in class and record them that way so I can annotate on them. And then the only other one is my response when I have, 160 to 200 students. A lot of times I don't care about 160 individual answers, especially because they're working in groups during the flipped. Really what I want them to do is arrive at an answer as a group and then let me see that. So I have fewer data points to look at. So I use something called menti.com. It's completely free. Students don't have to create an account. They just go either on their phone or to that website and enter that code that's at the top. And then they can answer. So they can do, free response, multiple choice, pretty much anything a standard response software can do. And so I'll use that a lot of times if I just want to throw a question in. So it's just a different response software, but it's not tied to individual students. So if you want being able to keep track of who's responding, you won't be able to do that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my other screen. Okay, if anyone's a PhD comics fan, that's what that's from. It's my favorite thing. Okay, so here is what an assignment would look like. It's just set up completely through my LMS, and it just asks them to watch it and answer the questions. But if I actually go into one of the videos, okay, I had to watch it all myself because I had disabled seeking, so it bit me on that one. But so this is what it would happen. It would have the video. You can see this one's fairly short. And then the big tip I would put, if you're going to embed quiz questions, you can put as many as you want, but I would definitely put one right at the end, like within the last 2 seconds. If you embed quiz questions, the students can see, so they know that there's a question right there. So if your last question is right there in the middle, they will answer that last question and then quit watching the video. So I always recommend to put one right at the end. So if they were watching this video, I think I said it's only 2 seconds. They'll watch it and then it stops and does a question. They can, click whatever they want and then go forward. And it records it automatically into the LMS gradebook, which is really nice. So I don't have to individually go through and change those. And then to show you just an example of the video, this is where we're super spoiled. This is one that was done in our production space. And so you can see that I'm in it. Okay, I'm muted. You can see that I'm in it. And so that's the only time I do it, is when I'm doing a video for me for content. That's the only time that they can see me. Otherwise, it's normally just slides and just my annotations for that. But on the ones that I'm doing it fully for content, the students say they like to see me. So that's how I do my videos. The main changes I'm going to make in the fall for remote for this will really just be switching to the Zoom. We're going to do breakout rooms because we're going to be up to 200. We are fully online. I'm not allowed any face-to-face. So we're going to do breakout rooms, and I'm going to have students come twice a week because we have both lecture options and a recitation section. But each time in the breakout room, we'll have one UTA that will stay with each group in their breakout room the whole time. And then myself and the grad TA will be like going in and out of the rooms. But that way they'll have a designated UTA. They'll get to know, they'll develop that relationship throughout the semester. And we'll probably use Google Docs for that, for students to be able to turn in something so that we can monitor participation. That's kind of how I do the fully flipped. I'm going to change the screen so it's not on me anymore. Stop sharing.
Alrighty, I'm gathering that we're at the point now where we're open for questions, discussions, comments, anything along those lines. So please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll try and call on people.
So really quickly, I saw somebody asked in the chat if PowerPoint notes are available for download. I do for my flip videos. Essentially, I tell them to treat it as if they were in class, so they're available for them, so they can have them while they're watching and annotate just like they would if they were in a lecture.
Oh, I need to be up farther to see things. Nicole's sneaking a question there in the chat. Oh, lots of questions coming in. So let's go with Nicole's here. She's asking, how do you envision group working in face-to-face with social distancing requirements? Meghan, clearly you don't have to face that as you're all remote.
So here, so in the fall, I'm going to be teaching one section where I'm going to have 40 to 50 students, where I'm going to have half the class in the room at any given time, half the class remotely. And so what I'm I've been looking at using something like Jamboard, which is a Google product. We are also a Google campus, where students have a whiteboard that they can all go in and write on at the same time. So we're going to try to use that while having everyone in on a Zoom call at the same time, both people who are face-to-face and remote. So they can talk to each other through Zoom, and then they can write on a document that is open to the two of them. If I had a smaller class, I might try something like OneNote, because if you set up a course notebook, that gives you a collaboration space. I might try that for my inorganic class, which I'm also teaching in the fall, but I only have 6 people in the fall for that course. So I can do pretty much whatever the hell I want in that class.
We had a question from Julie come in about size of Zoom breakout rooms, and Neil, you'll be up next.
I do like 4, which someone replied, but with my huge class and a limited teaching team, currently in this spring, and then I'm going to do this in the fall, I do 7, because on an iPad, which a lot of my students are on, if you're on Zoom, you can see 9 people at once. And so if I do 7 students, that allows for 1 UTA and myself or the TA to be in there at the same time and still be able to see everyone. And it also limits the number of groups I have out of 200. So hopefully I can find enough like assistance for it. But I would definitely recommend trying to make it so they would be able to see everyone on the screen, is really important.
Neil, go ahead.
This question's for Meghan. About your inorganic course, you mentioned that you don't have a textbook, and obviously it's very large. I was wondering, and there's not kind of the Khan Academy stuff that many of us are also using for, say, larger Gen Chem classes. So how are you thinking about getting the content to all the students in a non-face-to-face format?
So even I'm it too much than what I do from face to face. So I a lot on like LibreText for a bunch of stuff. Decent chemistry. We also run into the textbook is the way our university is set up. Symmetry is not taught in my class. It's taught in the next class that's just taken by chem majors. And a lot of your inorganic textbooks have symmetry and group theory, which makes them kind of useless for my students. So, but for what I'm going to do on the non-flip, the flip I don't really have to change because I already have those videos. I'm recording really short videos just using that very top so students will PowerPoints and presentations hear my voice. And then what we have, this is solely for IU, but you could do something with an LMS quiz setup. But I use develop something called quiz, which you can put a couple quizzes into the students times as they just for understanding. So I'm going to do those at the end, but it'll be a little kind of really wanting to do that, but the style. But I prefer tech stuff.
Meghan, could you go over that last little bit again? You were breaking up on us, or at least I think so.
Sorry. For the most part, I'm going to do short recorded videos with check-in questions just to check content understanding. But those will be just slides with annotations. And then for like text, I import stuff from LibreText into my LMS and create pages like that for the different topics.
Okay. Other questions, comments? This is certainly meant to be a discussion. So if people have additional insights, not really a question, they're more than welcome to throw them out there.
Chip, there was a question about do we have issues with students having internet access? And I just want to say that I did not run into that too much in the spring. I know that in Massachusetts, Comcast was hooking up students for free, and I know that at least a number of our students took advantage of that. So I don't have a real feel for how many students that impacted. In my classes, I saw almost no issues with access to the internet.
We have a lot of really rural students, so hopefully this fall it won't be an issue because they'll technically be on campus, so they'll have our internet. But in the spring, I separated them into groups, and then instead of having synchronous meetings, I let the groups pick their own time. So students who lived in like really rural areas that don't have internet access, they would drive to like a close college or something like that, but that way they could do it when it worked with their group. Instead of having to do it necessarily on my schedule. I'm hoping that won't be an issue with the students on campus for as long as they're on campus for.
Amanda, I clicked on something and I thought your hand was up and then you disappeared.
Thank you, Chip. So I think one of the things I'm struggling with and thinking about really kind of jumping off into a true flipped classroom, not all the way flipped classroom, but at least getting into that 65% that Anthony's talking about, is, and Megan, you can help too, a little bit of the justification on the student side is I typically have done more lecture and some active learning, but alongside lecture in the classroom, and then they go home and do homework, right? And they might do quizzes in class or whatever else. And so I get the idea that I'm pushing some of that lecturing and the watching of the videos, and now there's all these pre-class assignments they have to do, and then we're gonna do these active, activities in class, which I'm super excited about, but then I'm also still asking them to do their homework questions, right? So like, how do I do this without actually giving them just a ton more work? I mean, it's probably the hours they should be doing, but I'm trying to make sure that I'm selling it to them in a way that feels good and I'm not kind of overburdening them with my expectations.
That's a really great question, Amanda. And that is something that I try to be very cognizant of as I create these. My pre-class assignments, I try to keep those relatively short, or as short as I can make them, so if I ask them to read something, I try to have them not read more than 10 or 15 pages. And even that's a long assignment. I try to shoot between 8 and 10 pages, with maybe 15 or 20 minutes worth of video. So, but I also try to keep my homework assignments over the weekend short, so under a half an hour, right? Because I figure that they get so many problems overall that I don't worry if I skimp on their homework assignments a little bit, because they do them in class, they do them pre-class. So that's how I rationalize it. Also, I tend to sort of, and not everyone has this luxury, but because my course is relatively small-ish, I also have full control over what happens in the lab. So I can sort of go and now pull time away from there in a given week if something's heavy. So like I might know, oh, well, there's a short lab this week. I'll take the half an hour at the end of lab and have them start something in that half an hour. Right, so then I view that lab block as mine. And if the lab only goes 2 hours, then I figure out a way to use the other hour, right? And do I do that every week? No, because then when I don't use it, I tell them, well, I'm giving you that hour back because I asked you to do all of these other things. So I try to frame it in that way.
I've lucked out with using students to convince other students. So I also, because I teach juniors and seniors, my homework's not graded. They don't turn it in. They've kind of realized that if they don't, it's going to make it a lot harder to, complete exams. But so I get a little bit of a break because I don't say like, here's another assignment, although they should be doing it. But I've had students, essentially once I started doing it, I started collecting like their responses. How long did it take them to do the practice problems? I call them practice problems, not homework. Afterwards, after we did a flipped classroom or the active learning in the classroom, that type of thing. And I was able to show data that just kind of shows that they are able to accomplish it more quickly because they've really gotten those struggle points out in class. And then also my students they happen to give me some really good quotes about how they really enjoyed working together in class, and they could learn it better because they were explaining it to someone else. And so I actually just show some of the stuff from my evals on day one. And then I really, like I said, I really focus, because I don't have all chem majors, on the other skills that they're developing during that time. But they seem to really like it. And I think they also, one of the side benefits is they have those videos so they can watch them as many times as they want, as opposed to just coming and seeing me once if I were lecturing on it in class. And that's been a benefit that they really like.
All right, we've got 2 questions from Lewis. Hi, Lewis. One for each of you, actually, I think, if I've read them and interpreted them correctly. The first one's going to Anthony. You said kinetics was terrible for flipped. What was the best, most adaptable topic for a second semester Gen Chem course?
So for Gen Chem 2, I find that now gas laws works incredibly well in a flipped setting. And that's because there are so many ways to go and out where students can go and now simulate gas behavior, that it gives them that visual. So that works exceedingly well. In the early part of equilibrium, where they're just trying to set up the expressions, that also works reasonably well. For Gen Chem 1, I find that Lewis structures and three-dimensional shape work reasonably well in a flipped format.
And his second question, which I think is probably aimed more towards Meghan, was during the hybrid sessions, do the instructor or TA jump between in-person discussion and breakout rooms, or?
I won't have the in-person.
Right.
But myself and the TA will be going like throughout the different rooms. So we will be moving around, whether if we were face-to-face. But I don't know if Anthony, if you have ideas on that, since you'll have the half and half.
Well, so I found in the spring that normally I would have about 7 to 8 groups in a class, and it's impossible for me to hop around. Like, I mean, I would hop as much as possible, but I couldn't spend as much time with the groups that I had to have. Since I'm going to have the hybrid this year, what I think that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mix my groups between in class and out of class, and have someone who's in class be like the reporter. And so if there's a question, that they have to give me the question, so I don't have to watch the chat in Zoom quite as much.
Looks like Julie had a question, but our presenter for next week seems to have kind of addressed it a little bit. It basically came down to aha moments, and do you feel like students miss them in sort of a flip setting, or do you feel like there are more of them?
I don't feel like they miss them. You don't have to give them everything in the video. And so you can use the video, and don't forget, they don't have to have all the videos available at once. So you can really set them up for the base material you want before they come in that day. So you might set up the foundation in the video and then use the activity to give them that data from a lab experiment or a hypothetical situation. And then they're working through that. So they discover those aha moments. I found my students like them better because they don't get as frustrated because they're in a group. So they might find the question frustrating, but they have that support structure of other people to work through it. So I found them more willing to work through it and not as quick to give up as if, I'd see a student by themselves working through it and then come to office hours and be like, I just don't get it. What's the answer? Versus having other people to turn to right away. So you can set up those aha moments that are pretty nice.
Yeah, and I do something quite similar, is that in my pre-class stuff, I try to leave out some of the more complicated material, and because I want them to come in with a base of knowledge, but I want the activities in class to sort of lead them to apply that knowledge to something that's a bit more complicated. So I try to do that somewhat intentionally. In the sequence of problems I have them work through, I go and I sequence them in a quite particular way, where the first question could be just a full recap of stuff they did out of class. Then the second thing is one little twist that I didn't cover in there. Then the next question is maybe like something they learned in a previous chapter, but then they had to apply it here, right? You know, and so I try to scaffold everything to lead them to the aha moments, and not always trust that they'll find them when they're not in front of me. And the way that I look at it is, just because I don't see them having aha moments, it doesn't mean that they aren't having them when they're outside of class, right? You know, if a tree falls and I don't hear it, does the tree still fall? Well, yes, just because I don't hear it, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Excellent. Other questions, comments? Oh, Matthew's got a question for us. Go ahead, Matthew, and then we'll get Abby.
Thank you guys very much. Is there any, you said that MO theory was kind of a tricky thing to flip. And you'd said that it was a little bit because they thought that they could just it's kind of like calculations, right? If you watch somebody do it, it makes total sense. Do you have any like tips as to like what might hint at what could be a challenging topic besides that?
So, well, I had the nice part that I've taught the same class for, I don't know, 15 semesters now. So I figured out what they were struggling with. But if there's things, I would always recommend talking if you have somebody that if you hadn't taught it or something like that. But things where I found them to be very methodical, like I see a lot of patterns in MO theory, or for organometallics, you know, you learn each individual reaction, and the catalysis is just putting those reactions together. So where I saw a lot of patterns, that's where I noticed students not thinking that it was going to be difficult, because I saw it patterns and they just forget that I've had a whole lot longer of a time learning those patterns and applying them. And so in all three topics I did, that's kind of where I saw it, where students be like, oh, so it's just X, Y, and Z. Then it's like, well, what about Z part 2? Or what happens if I make ZA? Like that type of thing. And so that practice. But for me, though, that was a way that I started identifying those areas. And then because I had seen their performance since I had taught the same class for a while, it was kind of, and I only started with MO, then I added in crystal field, and then I added in organometallics. So I didn't just like flip a whole lot at once, because it does take a while to prep.
John had a little issue there, Megan, and would like you to repeat something. The only problem is I'm not sure what part exactly. Maybe I'll unmute John here real quick.
Hi, everyone. Megan, thank you very much. And Anthony, thank you very much. It was a break in my internet connection. I think the first part you start talking about the MO diagrams and some of the tricks and things you learned about that. I know you said you taught it for 15 semesters, and then I lost you after that. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, if you're looking for areas that might be a good start to flip, things like MO diagrams are things that to you have a lot of patterns, so it just makes sense. You know, if you change from, you know, N2 to then CO, like a lot of us are like, oh, they're isoelectronic, but students don't necessarily make that connection, so they find that really hard. So those types of subjects can be really good to start with the flipping. But I also said only like start small with your flipping. Don't try and do the whole semester.
Thank you.
I think Abby had a question.
Hi, good presentation. I just had a question about like your outcomes for students. So like for Anthony, I guess you probably have more information about this. What did you know in terms of like student success in terms of flipping versus not flipping the classroom? Were you seeing an increase in student performance? And if Megan, you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Abby, I have some data that I don't have at my fingertips at the moment, but from what they see in the literature, they find that flipping the classroom tends to compress your grading scale, meaning that the students who typically end up in the DFW area tend to rise higher. And that's sort of consistent with what I saw in my classes, that I did see fewer people ending up at the lower end of the spectrum, in even moving up to the C range, which is great. I saw relatively smaller amounts of movement on the upper end. However, I did find that every semester I would have a handful of students, and students who were obviously really good students, that I had students when I started doing this who did better in this class than any other time I had ever taught this class in the 12 years I had taught it. So I find that the upper echelon students really sort of glom onto this, and it allows them to sort of flourish, but it also provides a bit of a safety net for the people at the bottom. And as I said, I'm sorry that I don't have hard numbers, but I just don't have them here with me.
All righty. Any last questions? We're at about that hour-ish mark. Let me join it. Oh, is that a question coming, Fabiola?
Yes.
Go for it.
So how about evaluations? I mean, like, you know, we know that nowadays students can pay, you know, professional services to answer quizzes and final exams for them. So how do you curb, you know, cheating with online evaluations?
You know, that's something that could be a whole hour itself. That I don't think I have any answer for that. In my Gen Chem class in the spring, what I did was I just sent out PDF files for the students to go and annotate, and they had 2 to 3 days to go hand them back in. In Gen Chem, I had colleagues who set up their exams in the LMS, which was Blackboard, or using the online homework system. I think that having it sort of in the LMS was better. Although what I've been trying to do is rethink the way that I evaluate, so I don't have to worry about that. In my inorganic class that I've taught now for 20 years, I give only take-home exams. And I've been doing it this way for the past 5 years. And I've just, over the years, I've created a stable of questions that aren't Googleable, right? You know, they're almost all based upon something that's in the primary literature, and I pull them out, and and most of my questions have so many parts now that I can give, you know, like this one part this year and then use these 2 parts the following year in a different way. And I find that in my take-home exams for my inorganic class, my scores range from, you know, sort of 50 up to 92 on any given exam. So exactly what I would see in an in-class exam, and I see no difference. But that's a special case. For something like Gen Chem, I think it's a lot harder thing to do. And I'm not sure that any of us, or that out there, I'm not sure that I've seen any good answers to the best way to do this.
We are certainly taking suggestions for future SLiTHERs. I think I heard one there. If anyone feels particularly insightful on online evaluations and wanted to volunteer to present during one of these, please send me an email. We'd be happy to get you into the schedule, because I am sure that is a topic of great interest to the community. And as more and more people are joining me in the "we're going virtual," it's coming. I'm telling you, Amanda, it's coming. It's going to be of even greater interest, I think. So any final questions, comments? If not, let me once again thank Anthony and Megan for presenting today, for all of you for joining us. Next week, our presenter will be Caroline Salma. She's going to be talking about similar aspects about flipping the classroom, and in particular relating it to inclusivity issues. So a really important and interesting subject. She's making me do work by saying that she's going to host it at noon on Thursday, but that is noon Mountain Time. So I have to sit down and figure that one out. There will be announcements on Viper.
2 hours off of Eastern.
Thank you. I kind of had it right about there, but I had to make sure. But please join us for that. The announcements will come out on social media. We'll do a sign up just like we did this week. I'm going to end the recording now, assuming I find it.